Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. So now we want to know exactly, we want to add these items here. We are adding these items to an array, but that's not enough. We want to add the items to the list over here. So in order to do that, first let's start by updating this number. So once I click on items like this, it should tell me that I've actually added an item here, even though I don't see it by looking at that number. So let's refresh this page, go back to add item, and this is where we add an item. And once we do add an item, the count for items in console.log changes. So we can use this to update a specific item. Now, instead of adding the code here, I can add the code here for updating the number over here, but that's not a good way to do it. A good way to do it is to create a new function, and let's call this one refresh items, right? So let's call it refresh items display, like this, very specific. Yeah. So let me copy that. That way, the reason why I add a function like this, that way we can use this function anytime. Maybe we are not really adding an item. It could be that we are increasing an item's quantity as well. Then instead of redoing the code that we'll add here, we're just going to create a function. That way we can just call that function every time we want the data to update. So right about here, let me add a function and with the same name, like so. Okay, so refresh items, we don't need to pass any values because the only item we need really is the items array, right? So all I want to do is grab the item that has, where is this? This is items, right? And there's a number somewhere. Okay, this is not the item. This one right here. So it has a class of badge. Okay, so right here I can just say JS item count, like so. That way I can grab this item anytime. So let me go down here and let's just say var count. I don't know. Let's call it item count is equal to document.query selector, and then let's select a very specific item like so. And then the inner HTML will be item count dot inner HTML is going to be equal to items dot length, right? Yeah, just items dot length, because items dot length is a number, so it's going to have that number inside it. So let's see this in action. I'll refresh and I'll click on these items. As you can see, the number is changing as I am adding items to this item thingy. Very cool. But let's also display the items here, because that's easy to do. So right here where we're saying refresh items, what I want to do is look through the items here, and I need to grab a different item as well. So this other one is not item count, but this is the items div. I don't know why I keep putting a C over there. Okay, JS items. I think there should be an item with this. Yes, there it is. It says 2 over 2 matches here, which means there is at least one item with that class. So this is where we'll put our items. And remember that we have this item HTML function, which we just give it some data and it's going to display something. So that's great. So right about here, I just want to, what will I do? Refresh items. I just want to empty the div. So I'll say items div dot inner HTML is equal to an empty string, like so. And then let's do a for each loop or for loop. We don't have a for each in here. And I want I don't know what you can do. Maybe you want the first item last, etc., etc., so that or that way you can see when you add a new item. So let's use this for each that's improved. Anyway, it's just that it goes in reverse. So it starts with the last item and then puts the first one last. So things is going to change to items, right? But the one in capital letters, because that's the one that contains the items we want to add here. So items 1 is some data. So what we can do is we can say item, is it items HTML? Wait, item HTML, that's what it is. Okay, so if we give that function that data, then it's going to be good. So item, it returns the HTML required. However, since we've emptied this, we want to plus equals so that we can add to it. So let's see what we have so far. If I click, there we go. Clickety-click, 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 clickety-click. So as you can see, we are adding items here, but it's the same item repeated over and over. So that's not very exciting now, is it? So what I would do instead is on the HTML, we have to replace this data with something more, of course. Let's select this and shift, or we just put a $sign there, and that's what happens. So we'll use data.description, we will put there, and of course we need an image. So right here I will $sign and put data.image, of course. And what else? We need the price over here. So same process, I'm going to put data dot, is it price or amount? I have no idea. I think it's most likely amount. And yeah, that looks pretty awesome already, because that's all really we need, just the image and etc., etc. So you can see here I'm adding these, the latest item is right at the top. That way you can easily see it, that you're adding something. Now look at this, I can add this item several times here, which is not very nice, because I don't want, if I have 20 of these items, to have a list of 20. I'd rather have the quantity increase if I repeat an item instead of this. So this is not cool, and that will maintain the count as well, because then we can reduce the count by just adding more to the quantity. So what we will do here instead is, we don't want to mess with the HTML itself. What we want to mess with is this part where we are pushing an item. So instead of pushing this item, let's check to see if the item actually exists, right? Because these items do have an ID, because this is purely database data. So it has an ID as well. So we can just compare the IDs. You can compare anything you want. The product descriptions, you can compare the barcodes, but I'm going to use ID because I know whether you're using barcodes or not, it's going to be there. So before I push an item there, what I need to do is search. So first of all, let's create a variable called found, and if we do find the item, then we can do something else, right? So I'm going to say var found is equal to false. Okay, so let's start with that. Oh no, this is not gonna work very well, because 0 is also false. Yeah, and 0 is a valid ID, so this is not going to do very well. However, let's just do this. Let's just go ahead and try to let's say check if item exists. Okay. So we're going to do a for each loop. So the item we're looking for is this one. So the ID of this, we should check against the items thingy here. So let's do a for loop. It doesn't matter if it's in reverse, or it really doesn't matter. It'll work either way. So I want to go through all the items that exist so far. So say items.length, and then we will do a loop. And what we are checking for here is if items I right there dot ID is equal to products index, which is what we are dealing with here. Yes, dot ID, right? If these two are the same, then this particular item exists. So this is what we are looking for. If any of them has this, then we should get that ID. So anyway, found is equal to false, and we should know the index where we found this thing and increment it. So right here, let's just, in fact, I don't need this. If I can go to a for loop and put an if statement, if we find it once, we don't need to go through the loop again. We can just break. So if that is true, then let's break like this. So break is going to completely stop the loop. Okay, so but instead of just breaking, we know that this item that we have found is inside this current ID of items, right? So let me see here. We don't have a quantity number actually, so we don't. But wait a second, I think we do over here, quantity. This is the quantity that comes from the database, right? Not the quantity that the user has selected. So that needs to be fixed as well. So what I'll do is, here I'm just going to say quantity, and inside items, so we won't add any new thing at all. So I'm just going to say items I quantity plus equals 1 like this. So this will add 1 to the quantity and then break this thing. Then we won't do a push at all. Okay. Oh, I guess we needed the found then, right? So if we break here, we don't get to refresh this, right? I'm trying to avoid repeating my code, but it seems inevitable that I will repeat it. So if we break here, then we found something. If we don't, then we're going to get to the items push. So instead of just breaking here, we're just going to return. So we're going to exit the entire function altogether so that we don't get to this point. So once we add that item, we return. However, it would be a good idea to refresh the table before we do any returns. So let's refresh the items display and then return, and just put break just to be sure, but we won't get here because return just completely overrides this. So maybe let's just remove that. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so what's happening here is that if we are looping and we find the item, we'll completely just add a quantity, refresh the table, and exit the function. If we go through and never find it, then we're going to add this item and refresh the table. So simple and straightforward, and let's give it a shot. Now the thing is, quantity originally is going to come from the database here, because this is the data we are giving there. So we must override this with a number 1 because we want to know what quantity the user has selected. So right here, when adding an item, when we say this dot push, right, what we need to do is change something before we add it here. So what I'll do is, I'll do this. I'll say var temp, we're just going to call it temp, is equal to that. So that's the temporal data that we've got of the product. So I've just added it here. That way I can manipulate the data before I push it into this section here. So say temp.id, not id but quantity, is equal to 1. That way at least I set a proper quantity. I can also remove some items I don't like, like images. We don't really need the images data as well here. So how do we even remove an item? I think we use slice, right? However, let me avoid that for now. Okay, so let's come back here and just refresh the page and let's try this out. So I'm going to click, and as you can see, the number remains right there, right? Good. But then this is not replacing anything. So what we would do is we're going to go to this part right here. So there should be a value, and value is equal to 1, right? But let's instead put a $sign and then say data dot quantity, and we are home and dry. So refresh, and if I click and keep clicking, you will see that the quantity is increasing over there, which is very awesome. So unless I add a new item, this is 17 of these, that's 1, now there's 2, and I add just like that. You see, only increases when I add a new item, like so, as it should. Yes, very cool. Now to finalize this whole thing, we just need to add a total down here so that the total can update as we are updating these items here. And that is a very simple thing to do, of course. So what I'll do is let's go to right here on add item. We can do this on the refresh items, since in here we do have a loop that is going on. So after every item is added, we can take advantage of this loop to do some calculations. So here I'll just say var grand total underscore total. Grand total is equal to 0. Okay, so we put it at 0, and then finally we can grab the grand total item from here. So that's the total, and so this is the div that has that total. So what I can do is instead add a to simplify things, or maybe not, let's just add to the class here. I'll just say we'll call it G total, grand total, right, like that. So what I'll do is down here I'm going to say where is this add item, refresh right here. There's an item with G total. Let's copy that and let me put it right there, and I would say G total div. It's such a total div. Okay, so there we go. So G total div dot inner HTML is going to be equal to, of course we need the total number like that, and then, oh sorry, this is not PHP, I have to use the plus sign. So let's add the plus sign and put grand total over there. Okay, so if you have a currency you can add it there, so we just add that dollar over there. So let's refresh, and we're going to start with a 0 just so we can be accurate here. So that's a 0.00, like so. Let's refresh, and there we go. So let's start adding items. We still get a $0, but it changed to just a 0, so we know it's actually working. It's just not counting to the total. So right here we can take advantage of this, and right here I'll just say G total or grand total plus equals. Now I'll say plus equals here, and I want to get the amount from items, right? the item's I right now. So this is the current item dot amount, but this doesn't take the quantity into consideration. So let's duplicate that and let's multiply by the quantity. So QTY like this, and then let's put that in brackets just for to be easy on the eyes. Very cool. Refresh and let's click over there. We have $50. If I click again, we have $100 because that's times 2, and we have 20, that's 120, 140. So it's calculating as intended. Okay, very cool. As you can see it here, it's corresponding to the correct amount. That's 10 by 3, 30 something, another 30, that's 60, yeah, 100, 40. So yeah, it makes sense actually. Now the only problem is if we try to increase any values over here, this doesn't do anything really, and that's tragic, isn't it? So let's see how we can have that actually update our situation.